Idiom. An idiom is a type of figurative language that has a meaning that's different from its literal meaning. It's used to add color to writing and make it more interesting. There are lots of idioms in the English language and even more worldwide that you could look up. Some of them may sound really funny to us, but a lot of them are based on old rituals or an old way of doing things, and they've kind of transitioned into newer days, but they have different meanings that aren't the same as the literal meaning anymore. Some examples would be kick the bucket. Well, a person isn't going to actually be kicking a bucket. It means they're going to die. If you said, oh, our old cow finally kicked the bucket, well, it just meant that the cow died. If you're bent out of shape, you're not actually bent a funny way. It means that you are upset or worried about something. If you hear something or hear from someone out of the blue, it's something that comes about unexpectedly. If you said something was a piece of cake, it would mean that it was easy to accomplish, as easy as eating a piece of cake. If you buy a lemon, it means you buy something that breaks immediately. A lot of times this refers to a vehicle, and so if you buy a used car and you think, oh, I got this great deal, and then it breaks within a few days or one of the parts breaks, then people say, oh, you really bought a lemon. But it could be anything. If you bought a sofa and you got it home and you had it for a couple days and you realized that one of the cushions was really stained or the middle of it was missing springs, and so you kind of sunk into it, then you might have bought a lemon in that way. But it basically means buying something that breaks immediately and wasn't quite what you thought it was. It turned out worse. And my last example is hit the hay. You're not actually hitting a bale of hay. It just means you're going to bed. So, idioms are figurative language. There's lots of different kinds of figurative language that you can use, but this is a fun way to add color to your writing. There are countless idioms, and most of them are commonly known. So if you use them in your writing, your reader will know what you mean, but they'll like that you tweaked it a little and made it a little more clever. You made it not just writing out the literal phrase. Especially if you're repeating a certain kind of topic or certain details several times, you may want to find different ways to say it, and sometimes an idiom can do that for you. Purpose. An author writes with one of four purposes in mind: to inform, to describe, to entertain, or to persuade. Once we figure out which one of these four purposes the author is writing with, we will be able to better understand his or her motivations for writing. If the author is writing to inform, it will probably be nonfiction. And some examples you might see are research papers or recipes. You are getting information. The author is informing you of something. They're informing you how to do something. It's nonfiction. Their purpose is simply to inform you. If the author's purpose is to describe, it will probably be fiction. And it's going to have lots of details. A descriptive story or paper is going to elaborate on details. It's going to give you as much description as possible, and a lot of times that's going to be something that's a work of fiction. While you will have details in an informational paper or writing of some sort, it's not going to be the same kind of details you'd get in a descriptive fictional narrative. If the author's purpose is to entertain, then it will also probably be fiction, and you will have humorous and or dramatic elements. Now, something that's funny or humorous is going to be entertaining, but something dramatic can be just as entertaining as something funny. And some of the best stories are going to have humorous and dramatic elements in them. So something written to entertain is usually fiction, and it will sometimes have both of these elements, or sometimes just one or the other. But it's written to entertain you, to make you feel entertained, like you are reading a story that you are enjoying. If the author is writing to persuade you of something, you are probably going to see an editorial or an advertisement. All those ads you see on TV are meant to persuade you to buy something, persuade you that one product is better than another. So that is where advertisements are going to be one of the primary places that you see persuasion writing. An editorial in a newspaper may lean toward or against a certain topic or candidate in a political campaign, and so those are also written to persuade you one way or the other. But most people are going to see ads on almost a daily basis, whether it's on the internet, whether it's on the TV, whether it's on a billboard driving down the highway. So this is something you'll see every day, whether you're trying to or not. So the four main purposes an author will write with are to inform, to describe, to entertain, or to persuade. And once you determine what the author's purpose in writing is, you will better be able to determine the author's motivation for crafting his work.
Quotation marks are used to show that the words inside the quotation marks are someone else's, not the writer's own. So look at this sentence. "Come over here," Joe said. So the quotation marks right here and right here are conveying that the writer did not say "come over here." Joe said "come over here." So notice a few things about a sentence that has a quote in it. First, you open up the sentence with quotation marks. Then you capitalize the first letter of the first word inside the quotation marks. And then if you have a sentence that is declarative or imperative, any sentence that would end with a period if it was on its own, you end that sentence with a comma, then you have quotation marks, and then you say the rest of the sentence. So this sentence says, "Where did he go?" Notice we open up with quotation marks, capitalize the W, but if "where did he go" stood by itself, it would have a question mark because it's a question. So we put a question mark right here and then close with the quotation marks. Notice that the question mark is included inside the quotation marks. It's not on the outside, it's on the inside. This sentence says, "There he is," he exclaimed. So in this case, the person's saying it with a lot of emotion, so that's why we ended with an exclamation mark. Now these next couple sentences are kind of inverted from the sentences we've been looking at because the quote comes later in the sentence. So this sentence says, "Michael said, 'I can't wait for dinner.'" So you put a comma after "said," open up with quotation marks, go through the sentence, and then this sentence right here is declarative, so it ends with a period. And up here we ended with a comma, but here we're ending with a period because we've come to the end of the sentence, and there needs to be some kind of period or question mark or exclamation mark to end out the sentence. So in this case, a period is chosen to end the sentence, and then quotation marks are put at the end. Notice that the period is inside the quotation marks. This sentence says, "Michael asked, 'What's for dinner?'" In this case, it's a question, so that's why we have a question mark at the end. Again, notice that it's inside the quotation marks. Now this final sentence is kind of unique. It says, "I think we are having burgers," Michael said. "Do you know what we are having?" So right here, there's two quotes within one sentence. So it says, "I think we are having burgers." So we open up with quotation marks. We have the quote right here. We end with a comma because this is a declarative sentence. And then we have another set of quotation marks. Then we have something outside of the quotes because we're saying that Michael said this. And then we continue on with what Michael said. So we open up with quotation marks. And it says, "Do you know what we are having?" This is a question, so we use a question mark. And then we end with quotation marks. So those are the important things you need to remember when using quotation marks.
Transitional words and phrases. Transitional words and phrases are used to guide the reader through the text. You've probably seen a lot of these common transitional words and phrases before, but you may not have thought about what their operation is, what their purpose is in the paper. So let's look at the different ways transitions can be used. You can have transitions that show time information. For instance, after, before, during, in the middle of. These all tell you when in time something is happening. You can also have transitions that indicate an example is about to be given. For example, in fact, for instance, if you say something, if you state your main idea and then you want to give a supporting example, you can say, in fact, let me tell you this thing. For example, dogs make good pets because they are very loyal. These phrases let you know that an example is coming. Transitions can be used for comparing. Also, likewise, you're saying how two things are alike. This is also like this. Likewise, we can look at how dogs are good companions. You can also use them for contrasting, saying how two things are different. However, but, yet, you would like a dog for a pet because they are so companionable, but a cat is not going to be as affectionate. They won't make as good of a companion as a dog. So you can contrast two things using however, but, yet. Transitions can be used to suggest addition, to let you know that more is coming, and also furthermore. These all let you know more is coming, more examples are coming, more information is coming, more details of the same sort. You can have transitions that reflect logical relationships. If, then, therefore, as a result, since. If I go to bed late, I might be tired in the morning. I went to bed late, therefore I was tired in the morning. So these transitions reflect logical relationships. And our last example for transitional words and phrases are steps in a process. And these words show that exactly. They're showing steps in a process. First, you'll gather up all your ingredients. Second, you'll mix the dry ingredients in a bowl. Last, you'll take the cake out of the oven. So these steps are telling you exactly what's happening first, second, third. They may throw in next after that. They may not want to just put numbered all the time. Like last isn't telling you the 10th step, it just uses the transitional word last, but it still is giving you an idea of what step that is in a process. So make sure you use your transitional words and phrases where they will orient your reader and illuminate the structure of your composition. You want to let your readers know where they are in your paper. If you're saying first, this happens, next, this happens, or if it's steps in a process, first you do this, second you do this. Or if you're comparing and contrasting things, you would say, well, here's this, likewise, there's this. However, there's this if you're contrasting. And you want to illuminate the structure of your composition. If you're writing a compare and contrast essay, these compare and contrast transitional words are going to help highlight that that's what type of essay you're writing. If you're writing a persuasive essay, you might see a lot of examples. If you're writing an instructional essay, you'll see a lot of steps in a process. If you're writing an informational essay, you may have some logical relationships. So using these transitional words and phrases can help let your reader know what the purpose of your writing was. So please always include transitional words and phrases in your writing because you want to guide your reader through the text and let them know what your purpose is.
what is an adjective? Through this session, I want to find the answer to that question. Now, I know you are probably familiar with the term adjective, but I want to look more specifically at what an adjective is and how it can be used. So let's take a look at this first example. I like that green car. Now, the general definition of an adjective is a word that describes or modifies another word in the sentence. So in order to identify the adjective in this sentence, we're looking for a word that is describing another word. So if we look through this sentence, we notice that green car is in this sentence. And you can quickly realize that green is the adjective in this sentence. Why? Because green can't stand alone in this sentence. Green must be modifying or describing car. It's saying, I like that car that is green. Green is describing what kind of car is there. Let's go on to another example. My mom makes delicious food. Again, we're looking for a word that is describing another word in the sentence. So if you were to read this sentence and stop right here, you would read the sentence as, my mom makes delicious. So we can quickly realize that delicious can't stand alone in this sentence. So delicious must be describing something else. So we can just look at the next word in the sentence, food. My mom makes delicious food. So delicious is obviously describing what kind of food is here. Now I said that delicious can't stand alone here. And I was right. I mean, if food is gone, it says mom makes delicious. That doesn't make any sense. Now that is not always the case with adjectives. Like in this sentence, if I said I like that green, and we left car out, and the sentence just said I like that green, it still makes sense because the reader or the speaker or the writer of this word could simply be talking about that they like a certain shade of green. But a lot of times you can find an adjective because it can't stand alone in the sentence. Let's take a look at this next example. How much income tax do you have to pay? Now, this adjective is not as easy to find as other adjectives we've been looking at. So let's look closely at this sentence. We're continuing through this sentence, just one word at a time. How much income tax? Now, if you stop right here, you realize that income is describing tax. A lot of times, an adjective answers a question, like who, what, wow, when. So in other words, we're saying, like, what kind of tax is here? It's an income tax. What kind of food is here? It's delicious food. What kind of car is it? It's a green car. So a lot of times if you look at a certain noun in a sentence and you ask, what kind is it? Or ask some kind of question similar to that, you can find the adjective because the adjective is answering a question about another word in the sentence because it's further describing that other word. So if we look at tax right here, income is the adjective further describing tax because this could be a sales tax or a gift tax. But in this case, it's an income tax. So income is the adjective. Let's take a look at another example. They are here for an annual meeting. So, quick side note. There are words called articles. An example of articles are a, an, and the. So those three words are articles. Articles are also adjectives. So anytime you see the words a, an, or the, they're called articles and they are adjectives. So if we look at this sentence, it says they are here for an annual meeting. So boom, right here we see an, which is an article. So it must be an adjective. So what is an describing? Is it describing annual? No, it's describing meeting because we could take annual out and the sentence would say they are here for a meeting. So an must be describing meeting. Well, annual is also describing meeting because how often does this meeting occur? What kind of meeting is this? It's an annual meeting. So an and annual are both adjectives describing meeting. That leads me to another point. You can have more than one adjective in a sentence, and you could have more than one adjective next to each other. Like, look at that tall, blue-eyed man. Tall and blue-eyed are both adjectives, and they're both describing man, and they can be right next to each other. And sometimes you need to put a comma in between those two adjectives. But the main point I want you to get there is that two adjectives can be right next to each other, describing the same word. All right, let's look at another example, our last example. That is the right choice. So this one's a little bit harder than the other ones, but if you look at choice right here, okay, what word is describing choice? Right is describing choice, because this isn't talking about right or left. This is talking about correct or incorrect. So the author is saying that is the correct choice. Now, one last note about adjectives. Adjectives aren't always vital to a sentence. Like, you can remove them and the sentence still makes sense. So if we take income out of this sentence, you can read the sentence as, how much tax do you have to pay? That sentence still makes sense without the adjective. They are here for a meeting. So a lot of times you need articles in a sentence to still make sense. So if we leave annual or an in the sentence, but take annual out, the sentence still makes sense as they are here for a meeting. In this sentence, if you were to remove right, the sentence wouldn't make as quite as much sense. It would say that is the choice, which by itself that sentence makes sense, but you don't understand anymore that that's a correct choice. So I hope you get my point from that, is that adjectives are important to a sentence because they give us a further description of another word in a sentence. But many times you can remove that adjective from the sentence and the sentence will still make sense.
When taking your exam, you may come across questions where they ask you to determine fact from opinion. And sometimes this can be a little tricky. Obviously, when taking a test, if you know the right answer, you always go with what you know is the right answer. But if you find yourself in a situation where you're not entirely sure what the right answer is, perhaps you're running short on time, maybe 2 or 3 of the answers look like they might be correct, this little bit of advice might be very helpful, especially on this kind of question, whether it's fact or opinion. When asked about a statement, whether it's fact or opinion, remember that choices that are facts will have no ambiguous words in them. They typically will have no ambiguous words. Let me give you an example here. Listen to this sentence. How long is a long time? Well, of course, that's extremely ambiguous because long, in reference to time, may be up to each person. My young son thinks that 5 minutes is a long time, and yet 5 minutes is not nearly enough time in my experience. So the ambiguity of the word long there tips you off that this is opinion rather than fact. And it's typically this case. Let me give you one more to show you what I mean. What defines an ordinary person? Well, what's ordinary to me may not be ordinary to you or ordinary to someone else. That word ordinary, once again, is ambiguous. It's left up to each person's opinion. So that lets you know, all right, we're talking opinions here. Now, sometimes it's not clear. You may say, well, all of them seem to have some words of ambiguity in them. Well, once again, I said this is typically the case, that fact statements typically will not have words of opinion. But if you find a situation where they all seem to have words of ambiguity, the next thing you look for is the complete context of the question. And given that context, what you usually find is that the fact answer comes out in terms of a research finding. So let me give you an example of that. The scientist found that the eye reacts quickly to change in light. So the research finding there, given the whole context of the question there, will let you know that, okay, this is the fact here. Even though there may be some ambiguity in there, I don't know the scientist, I don't know what he found, the fact that it's a research finding says, okay, this is a fact. So typically you're looking for ambiguous words, lets you know opinion, but looking at the whole context you may see, I don't see any here, just merely of facts. They all have ambiguous words. You look at the whole context and you say, okay, well, here's a research finding. That's the factual one there. So opinions are set out in the context of words like so-and-so thought something, they believed something, they understood something, they wished something. So you're looking for those opinion words, thought, believed, understood, wished. And here's an example of that. He thought the Yankees should win the World Series. That's not a statement of fact, it's a statement of opinion. And we know that because we're tipped off immediately by that word, thought. He thought, he believed, he wished that the Yankees should win the World Series. And hopefully this little technique will help you out when you're taking your test. I once again want to reiterate, if you know the right answer, always go with that. But when you hit a little stumbling block, when you're not entirely sure, this will help you make a better educated guess. Fact statements avoid ambiguous terminology or are often listed as research results. Opinion statements, once again, have ambiguous terminology that's up to my perception, your perception, someone else's perception, and often include the words thought, believed, wished, or understood. If you'd like to learn more about this study further, I encourage you to go to the website linked beneath this video. If you click on the link, it'll take you there where you'll find an ebook ready for immediate download.
Topics and main ideas are vital parts of a paper, so it's important that you know how to find the topic and main ideas. But first, we need to understand what those are. So a topic is a subject of a text. Basically, it's what the text is about. And the main idea is the most important point being made. So every paper includes a main idea and a topic. And every paragraph also includes a main idea and a topic. So a topic is very general. A topic is not specific at all. It just tells an overview of what the paper or the paragraph is about. So the topic of a paper could just be tennis. That's the subject of the text, or the text is about tennis. But the main idea is more specific. The main idea is like a thesis statement. It's the most important point being made in the paper. So while the topic might be tennis, the main idea would be tennis is a good form of exercise. So generally you can find the topic and main idea in the first sentence of the paper. So it might say something like, tennis is a great form of exercise. So you know there, the topic's tennis, and the main idea is exercise. Or this might also be found at the beginning of a paragraph. If the paper is about something different, the paragraph may have its own topic and main idea. So the first sentence of the paragraph might be, tennis is a great form of exercise. And there, boom, you found the topic and the main idea. Some papers are more difficult and some paragraphs are more difficult, and you may have to read each sentence in that paper or paragraph and find the general theme of all those sentences, what those sentences have in common. But in general, it's very easy to find the topic. You can just scan the paper and figure out what the paper is about, and then more specifically, you can find out what the main idea of the paper is. And since the main idea is the main idea, it's the most important part of the paper, the main idea will be repeated oftentimes throughout the entire paper, generally in the introduction and in the conclusion, and sometimes in between. ACT, English style. Word usage, or diction, refers to the use of words with meanings and forms that are appropriate for the context and structure of a sentence. So this right here is your goal as a writer, to use words with meanings and forms appropriate for the context and appropriate for the structure of a sentence. Now, a common error in word usage occurs when a word's meaning does not fit the context of the sentence. This sentence right here says, Susie likes chips better than candy. Now, the appropriate word here is than, not then. Then is an inappropriate word for the context of the sentence. So it makes more sense to say Susie likes chips better than candy, because than is used in comparisons, while then is used in more of a chronological sense. Like I went to the store, then I ate lunch. Another example would be the cat licked its coat. The correct form is the cat licked its coat. Now, its and its are homonyms, which are words that sound the same but have different meanings. And you may be thinking, anytime a word is possessive, shouldn't it have an apostrophe? Which generally that is the case, and here its should be possessive. But with the case of the word its, you only use an apostrophe when you're talking about the contraction. So right here, the sentence is saying the cat licked it is cold. So that doesn't make sense, so obviously you're not supposed to use the apostrophe. Now, I just mentioned homonyms, and errors in word usage frequently occur with homonyms, which again are words that sound alike but have different meanings. So some examples of homonyms are it's and its, affect and effect, and there, and there. So it's very easy for a writer to confuse these words because they sound the same. Now, some other words that are commonly confused are then and than, and except. Now, these words aren't homonyms, but they're very close to being homonyms because they don't sound exactly alike, but they are pretty close, which makes determining which word to use a little bit more difficult.